Hey guys, Steve here. I had seen some questions about chord progressions, and that's one of my favorite things to play and think about. And so this video is if you want to think of some more interesting chord progressions. Maybe you're getting burnt out on using the same ones all the time, whether it's for improvising or maybe songwriting. These chords will inspire you to hear something fresh and new. I could just show you some cool chord progressions, but then you wouldn't know how to make more like that. So I thought I'd kind of give a little bit about theory mixed in there with where all these weird chords come from and how it all is actually okay. It turns out basically any chords can be used in a chord progression. And sometimes if you read something you're not familiar with, like jazz or some old show tune or something, you might think like, why did they throw that in there? That chord doesn't belong, yet it sounds good. What's the deal? Well, today I'll tell you what the deal is. So for simplicity's sake, we're just gonna start just in the key of C. And of course you could take all these ideas and transpose them however you like. But key of C, I don't know, for the sake of the piano or something, it's all the white notes, but this is on guitar. And so to start off, we have, let's just say our diatonic chords. Like, what are the options? If we're in the key of C, we're gonna improvise, we're gonna write a song. We have what they call the one chord, the first chord, that's C major. If this is boring to you, skip ahead, it gets more interesting. We have D minor, the minor 2, E minor, the minor 3, F major, that's the major 4. We got G, which is the 5 chord, and of course often we have G7, but we'll get to that. Okay, we have A minor, the minor 6 chord, and we have, a lot of times people call it B diminished. It's technically B half diminished, or what you can also refer to as B minor 7 flat 5. Okay, if it was B fully diminished, it would be that. You'd have a G sharp, and don't worry, that chord is available, but we'll just get to it in a second. But natively, if we were sticking just to what are those 7 notes in a C major scale, we end up with either just those 3, or if you add in the A, and then of course back to the 1 C. Okay, now just with this you could make, you know, almost every pop song. So there's a lot you can do just with these 7 chords. But chances are, if you're watching this video, you have become bored of those chords. So first thing, let's not forget that every one of these chords we already know and love can be suspended. Suspended animation, or suspended from a high wire. And there's 2 varieties of suspensions or sus chords. There's the sus2 and the sus4. And so the idea is you take whatever note is your third, and I mean that as in, like in C major, our third is E, okay? And if we let it go down to a D, we get this beautiful chord. It's just like a C chord, but with no E in it, because the E's been suspended down from a high wire to D. You could just leave it like that, but when you pull back up to that E, oh, it's so nice. Now likewise, we could go up a note in the scale and put our pinky there. And now the third is suspended up. That's the sus4. And the numbers make a lot of sense at first on the C chord, because that D is the second note, sus2, and is the fourth note in the scale, sus4. It starts to make less sense as you go to other chords in the scale, but they can all be, most of them can be suspended. So there's C sus2, C sus4. Now when we get to D minor, we can also do a D minor sus2, or it's just D sus2, and we sort of know it's D minor, but D sus2 and also D sus4 with that G up there. Okay, same thing, E minor. This one gets a little weird. We can definitely, the sus4 is an A there. Now if we go down like we would with the other ones, we get into a weird territory where we have an F in there. Which can sound kind of gross. But anyway, the F, we can lift up our A to get that F sus2. Very soothing. Relaxation, anyone? Not telling someone what to think. Now here, the sus4, if we were in the key of F, that'd be cool, be B flat. But we're in for a treat, because since we're in the key of C, if we go to the next diatonic note up, it's B, which we get. Okay, it's so pretty. And it's not really an F sus4 anymore per se, but 4s and 11s are the same thing, because if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, that's a fourth note, and if 8 is the octave, so 8's like 1, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so 11s are just like 4s an octave up, so sometimes it's just more convenient or makes more sense for what's actually played, that B is way up there. So B, we could call it F add 11. When it comes back down, it's even prettier than a regular sus chord. Okay, same thing, G. We got G, G sus2, G sus4, G. Same thing, A minor sus2, A minor sus4. Now the diminished, there's not really suspensions going on with diminished chords, I guess. In theory, you could do whatever you want though. If you want to add more notes or move certain notes around, that's your prerogative. So anyway, so now just we have our regular diatonic chords. We have all these susses. One nice thing is on that B minor 7 flat 5, if you play a E up there, then that could sound really pretty. You can also put the low E in there. Don't get crazy. It's intense. So those are kind of the sus chords. Now we can just kind of go through numbers if you're familiar with counting, adding sixths. And so same thing on C major. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's an A. So we just have to concoct our fingers in such a way where we have an A in there, which is really pretty. You could go lots of different ways you could do it. But the idea is it's a C major triad, and we have an A in there, oftentimes in place of the fifth. That G is going up. You could have both, but you really get that sixth sound if it's not fighting against the fifth in there. So C6, D minor 6, you're in for a treat, one of my favorites. So pretty. This is the same thing. That minor 3 gets weird because we could put a 6 if we wanted to, but if we're staying diatonic, then we end up with a C there, which you see sometimes. On its own, sitting there, it's kind of gross because you have this clash, but if it's in passing, it's perfectly acceptable to most ears. Same thing, we can do F6, and so you can play these open, you know, like this, and you could take that shape and slide it if you wanted to. F6, okay. We also have G6, like a G6. Remember that song? And so there's different ways you could play it, like that, or you could do like, which wasn't as pleasing. A minor 6. We're kind of in the same situation. If we stay diatonic, there's that F up there. It's not the same as. Okay, B diminished. Poor guy. He has so many things, only so many things you could do to a diminished chord. And back to C. Okay, so like we just said, okay, I like C, I don't know, what could you say? I like C, F, G. It's one of my favorite chord progressions. But you're like, what if it was all sixth? Or likewise, you were like, hey, I like it, but what if it was all seventh chords? Seventh chords, we have C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7. Here I am floating in a tin can. Okay. What are we doing in sevens? G7, A minor 7. We have B diminished and C major 7. And there's lots of different, like, especially on the guitar, there's so many different ways to play these that can be pretty. Okay. So there's all our major 7 chords. We're still just diatonic. We're not going crazy yet. And of course you have ninths. Now, technically, people get confused about this, but so like C9 is not this. A favorite contemporary Christian chord. Okay. Bad boy here is technically C add 9 because it's a C major and you're adding a 9 in there for fun. But C9 technically implies that the flat 7 is there, which is B flat. So C9 is this. Okay, C9, C add 9. And then we also have C major 9, which implies it's like the C9 where the 7th is implied, except it's the major 7th. And so that one's really nice. You can get something like, it just gets really rich and pretty the more you start adding stuff. And the same chord can sound really different depending on the type of inversion you play it in, or the shape, or whatever. Okay, so, but in this case, C major 9 if we're doing our 1 here. D minor 9, our old buddy. Lots of ways to play it. Pretty sad. E minor 9. In this case, it would give us an F sharp, which isn't exactly what we're looking for. And the F isn't quite right either. So we're staying diatonic. It's not really exactly a thing. And we have, of course, our old buddy F. You could do F add 9 like a, or you could do F major 9 kind of thing. So in 9, similarly how 4 and 11 are the same thing, 9 and 2 are the same thing for counting. And so for instance, in the key of C, 1, 2, that 2, that's the D, that's the 9. And so if you ever want to know like what's the 9 of any note, it's just a whole step above it, because it's the same as 2. So in F we have a G there. So we could play an F chord like, well, let's add a G in there. We could go, which is a pretty one, a lot of Jimi Hendrix. Saying. So where was I? So yeah, G9, same thing. Okay, A minor 9. This one's so pretty on the guitar. You could do it like this, which gets your pinky to work. Or I like this one, really open. Okay, A minor 9. So we got all those 9s in there. Now we had 6s, we had 9s, and you can also have 6/9 chords, 6/9 chords, where it's just what it sounds like. You get the 6 and the 9, usually without a third and without, I'm sorry, not without a third, without the 5th in there. So for instance, C 6/9 is this kind of a shape. G up there if you wanted to. It's kind of nice. Okay, D 6/9, D minor 6/9 rather. That one's kind of tricky to get on the guitar, but it's pretty. We run into that minor 3 problem where it's like, so just don't worry about that one. F 6/9, G 6/9, like a G6, A minor 6/9. Let me think for a second there. So I guess we'd need an F in there. So I guess you could do something like if you wanted. So, okay. So far we haven't utilized any note that is not a white note. All different chord options in the key of C. So you may, for any number of reasons, want to maybe change sharp or flat some of those notes somewhere. And the most common place you see that happen at first is on the 5 chord. So we have altered 5 chords. It just lends itself to fun and experimentation, and just ends up pushing harder and harder and more interestingly back to the 1. So for instance, we could have in the key of C, G7C, G7C, whatever, that's fine. But we can also do things like do G7 sharp 5. So for instance, we have G, F, B, and this D, we can raise it up. And all resolve to a C major 7. likewise, we could take that D and flatten it. Oh, it hurts. In that case. Okay. Similarly, we could have just, without actually doing anything crazy, we could have G9. Now remember, I didn't say G add 9, like this. I said G9, which implies a flat 7 is there, so the F is there, and then the 9 up there. Now, coincidentally, if you use all 9s, you can play some pretty cool blues, like. Freezing that shape and sliding it around. Very useful. Now similarly with the sharp 5 and flat 5, we could do G7, flat 9, or we could do G7, sharp 9. And notice, if I did something, this is I think what turns people off sometimes, and turned me off initially from these altered chords and jazz chords or whatever, is it just wouldn't feel right. And if you kind of mix one in, if you're playing like a folk song, like what? You scare people. You don't want to do that. But in the right context, it could be so beautiful. So if you're already C major 7E, swooshy jazz, and it's important in terms of voice leading, when you have that note that's non-diatonics, altered, that it's really important how that resolves. It will make or break whether it sounds good and pleasing to the ear or not. So for instance, just like on G7, the wants to fall down to E, right? When it resolves, if we went, be like, oh, what? Oh, there we go. Same thing with those altered notes. So like G7, sharp 5 wants to go up to the E. But if we go, it's like, whoa, because it's like, wah, but wah is usable. Or similarly, if we do like, but if we go, you know, same exact deal, it's like, oof, it's just something that actually causes me physical distress. So think about that if you're, or we did flat 9, sharp 9. We could do our other fun one since it's just there. If we have this 9 shape and we use our pinky, we can get a good old-fashioned G13. And we really do have the flat 7, the 9, and the 13. And we can alter that 13 too if we want. We could do G9, flat 13. Starts to get pretty intense. Or we could do G7, sharp 9, flat 13. So if you ever see G7, sharp 9, flat 13 on jazz charts, you see it all the darn time. So the other thing you can do, let's say that you come through all this, you're like, I need more options. You can never have too many options unless they overwhelm you so much that you shut down. You lay in bed for days. That's too many options. But here's something you hear about, the old tritone substitution. Very intimidating, but it's not that big a deal unless you're concerned about opening the gates of hell themselves by playing a tritone. Illegal for a long time, but not so much these days. And so the deal is you take, in this situation, as we're just focusing being in the key of C, we have our 5 chord. What the idea of tritone substitution is we can substitute this with a chord that's a tritone away. And so this G7, its tritone is C sharp or D flat, whichever you like to call it. And so the idea is in a chord progression, let's say like a 2-5-1 chord progression where we have D minor 7, G7, C major 7, we can replace or substitute that G7 with some kind of C sharp chord. So we'll do a few. So we have D minor 7, C sharp, just C sharp major, C major 7. We could also do C sharp 7. So D minor 7, C sharp 7, C major 7. It's not that bad. Tritone substitution. Sounds like it's kind of crazy, but the voice leading is what makes it work. If I were to do it in a way that was like D minor, you know, C sharp, it's like, what? It's like, it's the right chords, but the way the notes want to resolve from one to another makes all the difference in the world. So or you could go things like that. It can be really pretty. Don't be afraid of tritone substitutions. Now similarly, now we can kind of pretend that's basically a 5 chord. So we can do all the weird alterations we did to the G. The sharp 5, flat 5, sharp 9, flat 9, sharp 9, flat 13, all that kind of stuff. They're just numbers, and the deal is you can just choose whatever matches the emotion that you're going for, the amount of dissonance that one can withstand. You can make anything work. Okay, tritone subs, not a big deal. Works the same in all keys. Next, let's see. All right, so, of course I'm not getting every possible chord there is. Okay, so don't send me angry emails saying you forgot, you forgot C major 7 sharp 5. And I'll say to you, did I? And so there's chords like that. But that's not the point of this, because unless you're writing James Bond soundtrack and you need a transition to make you wonder what will happen next, it doesn't come up as often. So these are supposed to be more kind of useful in everyday situations. But now we've mostly exhausted the gist of taking all those diatonic chords and, suspension, 6th, 7th, 9th, 13th, 11th, altered dominance, tritone substitution. That's it. That's basically the whole deal. But we're in luck because we can use other kinds of non-diatonic chords, so chords that do not naturally come from the scale, if you believe that there is such a thing called scales and that they involve 7 notes. That's just one kind of scale, but these are very useful. So the first kind that you may have heard of and encountered and wondered where that chord come from are secondary dominants. And in this case, think of it like any chord you have. If that was the 1 chord, what would the 5 chord be that would push to it? So in C, our dominant chord is G7, because G7 pushes very happily to C. And let's go through each chord. For D minor, we're in the key of C. Our minor 2 chords, D minor. But if we were in the key of D minor, just imagine for a moment the sadness of that. What would be the 5 chord that pushes into it? Now in minors, we have to think about harmonic minor, because that's the one that really pushes back to the minor. It would be A, or A7, our old buddy. So in the key of C, to get to D minor, we can go a little side route, okay, by going to an A. That at first, like, what? But then you play D minor, it's like, oh, okay, that's a very common sound. Okay, similarly, you could do that with anything you want. So let's say you're trying to get to E minor. Well, let's pretend we're in E minor. It's intense. What would be our 5 chord in E harmonic minor? It's our old buddy B7. And normally when you're playing in the key of C, the first chord you think of to go to next probably isn't B7. B7 doesn't belong in C major. Or does it? It does, because it's a secondary dominant of E minor. And it's all good. Same thing here. This one's fun, and you see it a lot. If we're going to our 4 chord F. It's a 4 chord in the key of C. But what if we were in F? We're like, yeah, I love the key of F, man. 1 flat. Oh. What would be the 5 chord? C7. What you're thinking if you're playing in C, that B flat in there is like, what? Well, it's perfectly acceptable in most social circles to play that 7 because it's the 5 of 4. It's pretty once you resolve it. Notice that B flat wants to fall down to N, sure enough I do. For fun, this is extra free info. If you really want to make people weep, you do C. You do C7 with an E in the bass to F on a piano with a big low E. Sounds really cool, kind of gospel-y. Okay. Same thing to G. In the key of C, G's our 5 chord. But for this G7, what if we happen to be in the key of G? Our 5 chord would be D7. Okay, so in that situation, if we're playing in the key of C, D is normally D minor. But we can also use D7 to get to G. G7 back to C. You can all lead home, kind of almost no matter what chord you use, as long as you kind of know where it's headed to. And so because of that, same thing to get to A minor. if we're in a harmonic minor, that major chord, that dominant chord would be E7. So if we're in C, everything's fine. What? Oh, that was so nice. That was so refreshing to the ear and to the body and the mind. Okay, so E7 can make an appearance. If you're noticing, it's kind of any chord, but it's good to group them, I think, mentally in where each one comes from, and then that kind of gives you the free plan for how to use it. And hopefully all of these kind of sound familiar from some song you've heard. Nothing I'm doing here is that crazy. So yeah, we got that. Okay. The other kind of sort of secondary dominant type of thing is just like the 5 of any chord can push to that chord as if it was the 1. Diminished chords have this magical ability to feel real nice wherever you land, as long as it's a half step below or above it. More so if it's below, a little less so if it's above. But let's say we're in the key of C, as we have been this whole video. And let's say we want to go to D minor next. Well, to get there, we can play a full diminished chord, C sharp, since that's right below D. So we can go C, C sharp diminished, D minor, or we could go C, with an E flat diminished chord, either above or below any chord can work, probably not both. So similarly, we could go C major 7, C sharp diminished 7, D minor 7. Now to get to E, we could just put another diminished chord in that hole there, E flat. Oh my goodness, now to F, F sharp diminished G9, G sharp diminished A minor, B flat diminished. I don't know what happened. B flat diminished. A diminished to a diminished. I guess it's not unusual. Okay, so that being said, that's kind of fun. And remember, technically, I guess there's really only 3 diminished chords total. And you're saying, Stephen, there's at least 12 diminished chords because there are 12 notes in a Western scale. And I to you say, nope. Because what happens is, because a fully diminished is just these minor thirds stacked. It's actually kind of, if you imagine like a grid, there's only so many ways those can get stacked within those notes mathematically. And so what you end up with is, if you start with, let's say, B fully diminished, which is B, F, G sharp and D, or A flat and D. If you go up that whole chord, everybody goes up a minor third to D fully diminished. Now we have D, A flat, B, and F. Those might sound similar to the chords, the notes from B fully diminished. It's the same notes, they're in it just in a different order now. And similarly, if we go up another minor third, F diminished, we have F, B, D, and A flat. Those same 4 notes in a different order. Same thing, A flat diminished is the same chord, essentially. And then if we go up another minor third, we're back at the one we started off. So in that situation, 1, 2, 3, versions of the same exact chord. So if we say, okay, fine, that gives us B, D, F, and G sharp or whatever. What if we did a C diminished? We get C, E flat, F sharp, and A. You're like, fine. Well, now the third one, C sharp, E, G, and B flat. You're like, okay. There's also D. Wait, oh, we already covered that one. And also E flat. Those are all the diminished chords. There's just really 3 if they're fully diminished, and they're in different inversions. So knowing that, you could say, well, if I'm at C major 7 and I want to get to D minor, I could play C sharp diminished. I could equally play E diminished. I could equally play G diminished. I could equally play B flat diminished. And it would all work out. It's pretty weird. So diminished, you can kind of go anywhere you like. And for every diminished chord, there's 4 versions of it that can equally as well go to the chord you're trying to go to. And it's fun. So we also have a situation where, remember those 5 of 5s? Well, there's no reason that you couldn't make a whole pattern of those. So for instance, in our example, we're going C to D minor. We're like, what's D minor? If it was the 1, we'd have an A7 to D minor. Well, if we go plan backwards, like, okay, that's fine, but what if A was the 1 chord? What would its 5 chord be? And in the key of A, it would be E7. We're like, okay, what if, just for fun, you could do this as much as you want, what if E was the 1 chord? What would be the 5 of that? B7. That's interesting. We encountered B7 once before as a secondary dominant to E minor. And we could say, what if it was B7? What if that was our 1 chord? What would the 5 be? F sharp 7. And what would the 5 chord be if we were in F sharp? It would be C sharp 7. It's basically 1s and 5s, 1s and 5s, 1s and 5s, imagining, right? And so we want to get to D minor, but we want to go a 5 of 5 of 5 of 5 of 5 route to get there. And you're thinking, if my chord progression is C, C sharp 7, F sharp 7, B7, E7, A7, D minor, that's gonna sound like pure garbage. And it could, but I don't think it will. If we were like, okay, C major 7, C sharp 7, F sharp 7, B7, E7, A7, D minor, or we could even say, now let's change it. Let's make the target chord G7. So what's the 5 if we were in G? D. What's the 5 if we were in D? A. What's the 5 if we were in A? E. What's the 5 if we were in E? B. What's the 5 if we were in B? F sharp. What's the 5 if we were in F sharp? C sharp. What's the 5 if we were in C sharp? G sharp. What's the 5 if we were in G sharp? E flat. What's the 5 if we were in E flat? B flat. What's the 5 if we were in B flat? F. And what's the 5 if we were in F? C7. Okay, so now we're kind of back at that home chord with the secondary dominant one, right? So we could follow a whole crazy pattern like that just to get to G7, the 5 of 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 the 5 or something. I don't know how many 5s. Let's try it, see what it sounds like. So we have C. C7. G7. Back to 1. It's crazy, right? It's a good time. So we're in C. C7. F7, B flat 7, E flat 9, A flat 7, D flat 7, G flat 7, B flat 9, E7, A7, D7, D7 flat 9. Here's a cool tritone substitution I didn't mention. You could, if you wanted to, and you were crazy, make it a major 7 chord. For instance, we're in C. Let's do a 2, 5, 1 in C. 2, D minor 7. 5 is G7. 1 is C major 7. Now let's say the tritone of G, C sharp, right? So let's do a C sharp major 7. So first D minor 7, C sharp major 7, C major 7. It's not that crazy. So who would have thought in the key of C, C sharp major 7 was a great option? Well, it is, but not if you're like C, A minor, C sharp major 7, D minor. It's like, it's kind of weird. You could make that work. But in these typical uses, they just flow much more nicely. Okay, so we did the 5 of 5 of 5 of 5 and all that kind of stuff. Okay, that's right. Borrowed chords. Have you ever wanted to make a chord progression, but you couldn't afford it, and you had to borrow some chords from a friend, but they worked in the coal mine, and they were a minor, and they were parallel parking? That's dumb. Basically, you can borrow any and all chords you like from the parallel minor. So for instance, in the key of C major, like we've been doing, the parallel minor is just that chord minor, as opposed to the relative minor, which is your cousin that works in the coal mines. That would be A minor, which is still diatonic, and that's fine. We're talking about parallel minor, the same root note, but minor. Now, then minor, we also have different forms, right? In general, there's our buddy, the natural minor, and then we have the harmonic minor, and we have the melodic minor. And if you just follow out building thirds with all those, you get a variety of different chords. And all of those generated from all those scales are perfectly fine to borrow, even if you're in the key of C major. And so what are those chords? This is getting really long, so I don't know if I need to play every single one. I think you kind of get the gist by now, but just for instance, we have C minor, and not just C minor, we have all the minors. And we have the sus2, we have the sus4, and we have the C7 sus4 to C minor, like all the minors. Minor 6. We even have, God forbid, the C minor major 7. We're in James Bond territory, so don't say I left minor major 7 out, okay? But use that one with care. That's my advice. Don't do it just because all the cool kids are doing it. You know, follow your own heart and your own artistic intentions or therapeutic intentions. All right, so in C minor, we have all the C minors, right? We have all the D, well, both. D diminished, D half diminished, or D minor 7 flat 5. And just like we learned about all the diminished chords, that D diminished, we could also play F diminished, we could also play A flat diminished, we could also play B diminished, and those are all the same chords, same 4 notes, flip-flopping around, okay? We also have our old buddy E flat, the major 3 in C minor, and E flat major 7. We have, E flat 6 9. All the E flats you could imagine that could be derived from any of the 3 minor scales. We have F minor 6. F minor major 7, all the F minors, F minor 9. Okay, all those are fair game. G minor 7, all the G minors you can have, G minor 9. We have A flat major 7, and all those kind of guys. And we've got B flat 7, okay, and we also have B fully diminished, which is where that kind of G sharp ends up in there, and back to C minor. So what I'm saying is, when you're in C major, when you're making a chord progression, some good options just come from that parallel minor. So let's say like C major, F minor, tribute to John Lennon, A flat, G7, C. And it's like we never left. It's like, oh, that was like in C, but actually, interesting. Or similarly, we could be in C major and E flat, F. Okay, we could also be in C major and have that G minor. Okay, 504. So that's for instance. I do a C major, G minor 9, C9, which is now the secondary dominant of the 4, minor 4, and then there's the B flat that comes from the flat 7 from our old buddy C minor, E flat, A flat, D major 7, D flat major 7, C major 7. Hopefully that doesn't sound too crazy. It can look crazy if you're used to playing C, F, G, C, A minor, D minor, and you see other chords in there, you're like, what? But there's a lot of fun to be had, a lot of beauty to be had. And if you're writing songs, man, it can just be so nice to hear a fresh sound. It can be so inspiring. And as good as 1, 4, 5, and 6, and 3, and those guys are, there's like a limit to what you can express with that. So luckily there's all these other options that are so cool. All right, so what am I forgetting? Oh yeah, if we could, if we wanted to go real crazy, just like we could borrow from the parallel minor of C major, we could borrow all the chords generated in all the 3 C minors. The relative minor, the cousin or uncle that works in the mine of C major is A minor. The parallel major of A minor is A major. It's also the 5 for 5 of 5. Okay, in A major we have, all the A's: B minor, C sharp minor, D, E, F sharp minor, its forms, G sharp diminished, and A. So that might sound kind of wacky, and some of these get a little further from like a typical sound you might hear. But you could do like C, B minor, E7, A minor, A7, D minor, so you can use those however you like, and in any combination, as long as it sounds good to you and makes some kind of musical sense. If you threw all these chords in a bag and threw them out on the floor, there's a chance it could work out and be real musical and say something you want to say. There's also a chance it could be just like a horrendous train wreck. So it's good to know like where they come from and what chord usually goes to what chord. And so I hope that that's helpful in kind of laying out what all the options are. We have all the diatonic chords in their native triadic state, and then we could add 6, we could add 7s, we could add 9s, 6 9s, 11s, 13s, whatever we like. We could also do sus2s and sus4s. And on our 5 chord, we could alter it. We could do crazy stuff by sharping or flatting a 5th or a 9th or 13th or any combination of those. And we could also do tritone substitutions, or any 5 chord. We could substitute it with basically any kind of chord, tritone away. And we can also employ non-diatonic chords that are 5 of 5s and things like that, or 5 7s of 5 7s of 5 7s of 5 7s. And hopefully you're like, oh, that's why that song does that. That makes sense now. And what else did we talk about? Yeah. Diminished chords. There's really only 3 of them. Each has 4 forms, and they can go to any chord you like, from a half step below or half step above, and people won't think anything strange happened. You can also take the parallel minor. So like in this case, we're talking about C major, so C minor, and not just C natural minor, but C harmonic minor, and C melodic minor, and all that kind of stuff. Also, if you want to get real crazy, you could borrow any and all the chords from the parallel major of the relative minor, A major. And then in that case, once you have all those out, you just have way more options. And oftentimes, if you're looking for something to just spark your inspiration for an improvisation or for a song, you don't have to use all of this at once. In fact, that usually sounds pretty lame in general, or hard to know where it's going to land. People aren't exposed to, a lot of jazz or something like that. Can actually cause you to feel upset because your brain's like, I hate this, I don't know what's happening or where we're going to land. And then once you land, you didn't know you did. So some of these are an acquired taste, but the more you experiment with them, the more fun you can have. Oftentimes you just need like one interesting borrowed chord or one altered chord, that all of a sudden makes something that was really stale in your playing or in your writing or in your improvisation new and interesting again. And then once you explore that area, then someday you go back to just pure diatonic, like, oh yeah, this was good, you know, I'm not sick of it anymore. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions about any of that. I know it was kind of a lot of information, but hopefully you see the system of it, of thinking about what each chord does and what the pools of chords are. And of course, this kind of system you could just redo in any key. This gets us a lot of the most commonly available chords in C major, but you could do it start in B flat and flesh it all out again, or F sharp or something if you really wanted to. And I think it's much easier to do that once you really understand it in some key. It doesn't have to be C. If you just always play in D and you want to do it in D, that's cool. And once you kind of see the system, then you can use them in the moment. And so yeah, let me know if you have any questions. I hope that was helpful.